The morning sun painted golden streaks across the windows of Pages and Dream's bookstore as Jasmine Wells unlocked the front door. At 26, she had grown comfortable with her quiet routine in the coastal town of Willowbrook. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes held a gentle warmth that most people never bothered to notice. She wore a cream-colored sweater and dark jeans, practical clothes for a practical life. Jasmine stepped inside the cozy bookstore, breathing in the familiar scent of old paper and fresh coffee from the small cafe corner she had added last year. The wooden shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with stories that had become her closest companions. She flicked on the lights and began her morning ritual of arranging displays and checking inventory. The bookstore had been struggling when she took over management 3 years ago. Through careful planning and genuine care for her customers, she had slowly transformed it into a beloved community gathering place. Local book clubs met here weekly. Students came to study in the quiet corners. Elderly residents stopped by just to chat about their latest reads. As Jasmine prepared the coffee machine, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, Patricia Wells. The message was brief and cutting, as always. "Don't forget Melody's charity gala tonight. Try not to embarrass us." Jasmine sighed, setting the phone aside without replying. Her younger sister Melody was everything their family had ever wanted in a daughter. At 23, Melody possessed the kind of striking beauty that stopped traffic. Her blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves, her blue eyes sparkled like sapphires, and her figure could have graced magazine covers, more importantly to their parents. Melody had married into wealth and now spent her days organizing charity events and appearing in society columns. The contrast between the sisters had been evident since childhood. While Melody commanded attention at every family gathering, Jasmine had learned to find contentment in the background. She excelled in school, showed kindness to everyone she met, and developed a deep love for literature and business. Yet none of these qualities seemed to matter to Patricia and Robert Wells, who measured success purely in terms of social status and appearance. The bell above the bookstore door chimed as Mrs. Henderson, one of Jasmine's regular customers, entered with her usual bright smile. "Good morning, dear. Do you have that gardening book I ordered?" "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. I set it aside for you yesterday." Jasmine retrieved the book from behind the counter, along with a bookmark she had made featuring pressed flowers from her own garden. "I thought you might enjoy this with it." Mrs. Henderson's face lit up. "You're such a thoughtful girl, Jasmine. Your parents must be so proud of what you've accomplished here." Jasmine managed a gentle smile, though the words stung. Her parents had never once visited the bookstore or acknowledged her success in turning around a failing business. To them, managing a small bookstore was merely a phase before Jasmine hopefully found a wealthy husband like Melody had. The morning passed peacefully with the usual flow of customers. Jasmine helped a young mother find picture books for her toddler, recommended a mystery novel to a teenager, and spent 20 minutes discussing philosophy with Professor Williams from the local college. These interactions filled her with genuine joy, reminding her that her life had value beyond her family's narrow expectations. Around noon, the atmosphere in the bookstore shifted dramatically. A sleek black sedan pulled up outside, followed by 2 SUVs. Jasmine watched through the window as several men in dark suits emerged, scanning the street with professional vigilance. Then the sedan's rear door opened, and a man stepped out who made Jasmine's breath catch in her throat. Adrian Blackstone was 32 years old and commanded attention in a way that seemed effortless. Standing 6 feet tall with dark hair and piercing gray eyes, he possessed the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet when he entered. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, and he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any space. As the youngest tech billionaire in the country, Adrian had built his empire through innovative software solutions and strategic investments. His company, Blackstone Technologies, had revolutionized how people connected with information and each other. Despite his wealth and influence, he maintained a reputation for fairness and philanthropy, though he kept his personal life carefully private. The bodyguards flanked Adrian as he approached the bookstore. Jasmine quickly smoothed her sweater and tried to calm her racing heart. She had seen his face on magazine covers and news reports, but his presence in person was far more overwhelming than any photograph could capture. The bell chimed as Adrian entered, his gray eyes immediately scanning the space with obvious appreciation. The bookstore's warm atmosphere seemed to soften his usually stern expression as he took in the carefully arranged displays and comfortable reading nooks. "Good afternoon," Jasmine managed, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Welcome to Pages and Dreams. How can I help you?" Adrian's gaze settled on her face, and she felt as though he was truly seeing her in a way that few people ever had. "I'm looking for a quiet place to work for a few hours. I heard you have a cafe area." "Yes, of course. Right this way." Jasmine led him to the back corner where several small tables sat surrounded by bookshelves. "This is our quietest section. Can I bring you some coffee, please? Black? No sugar?" His voice was deep and measured, but not unkind. As Jasmine prepared his coffee, she snuck glances at Adrian settling into the corner table. He had opened a laptop and was already absorbed in his work, but something about his posture suggested he was more relaxed here than in his usual high-powered environment. She brought him the coffee along with a small plate of homemade cookies. "These are on the house. Baked them this morning." Adrian looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful." Their eyes met for a moment longer than necessary, and Jasmine felt warmth spread through her chest. She quickly returned to the front counter, trying to focus on her normal tasks while remaining acutely aware of Adrian's presence. Over the next 2 hours, Adrian worked quietly while the bookstore continued its usual rhythm around him. Jasmine noticed that he seemed to be listening to the conversations between customers and staff, occasionally glancing up when she helped someone find exactly what they needed, or when laughter drifted from the children's section. When Professor Williams arrived for his weekly philosophy discussion, Adrian's attention became more focused on their conversation about ethics and human nature. Jasmine found herself speaking more thoughtfully than usual, aware that someone was truly listening to her ideas about literature and life. As the afternoon wore on, word began to spread through Willowbrook that Adrian Blackstone was at the bookstore. A small crowd gathered outside, phones out and cameras ready. Inside, Jasmine watched Adrian's jaw tighten as he noticed the growing attention. "Is there a back exit?" he asked quietly when she approached to refill his coffee. "Yes, through the stockroom. But you don't have to leave if you're not finished working." Adrian studied her face carefully. "You're not going to call reporters or post about this on social media?" Jasmine shook her head. "Everyone deserves privacy, regardless of who they are. You came here to work quietly, and that should be respected." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, a warmth replacing the guarded calculation. "Most people would see this as an opportunity. I see it as basic human decency," Jasmine replied simply. Adrian packed his laptop slowly, as though reluctant to leave the peaceful atmosphere of the bookstore. As he stood to go, he paused at the counter where Jasmine was helping another customer. "Thank you for the hospitality," he said, placing a $50 bill next to the coffee cup. "For the coffee and cookies?" "That's far too much," Jasmine protested, but Adrian was already heading toward the back of the store. He stopped at the stockroom door and turned back. "What's your name?" "Jasmine Wells." "Thank you, Jasmine Wells. I hope to see you again soon." After Adrian left through the back exit, the crowd outside gradually dispersed. Jasmine found herself replaying their brief interactions, surprised by how genuine and thoughtful he had seemed despite his intimidating reputation. That evening, as she prepared to close the bookstore, Jasmine received another text from her mother. "You better look presentable tonight." "Important people will be at Melody's gala," Jasmine sighed, knowing she would spend another evening invisible at her sister's side, never imagining that the most important person at the gala might already be thinking about the quiet bookstore owner who had treated him like a human being rather than a celebrity. As she locked up Pages and Dreams and headed home to prepare for an evening of being overlooked, Jasmine had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she could never have predicted. The tech mogul, who had found peace in her bookstore, was already planning his return to Willowbrook. Drawn by something he had rarely encountered in his high-powered world, authentic kindness without agenda. The stage was set for a love story that would defy every expectation and challenge every assumption about what truly matters in matters of the heart. The grand ballroom of the Willowbrook resort sparkled with crystal chandeliers and golden light as the annual Children's Foundation Gala reached its peak. Jasmine stood near the back wall, watching the elegant crowd from the shadows while her sister Melody held court at the center of attention. The contrast between them had never been more apparent than tonight. Melody wore a stunning red gown that hugged her curves perfectly, her blonde hair styled in an elaborate updo adorned with diamond pins. She moved through the crowd like a queen, accepting compliments and posing for photographers with practiced grace. Their parents flanked her proudly, Patricia Wells practically glowing with satisfaction as society reporters interviewed her golden daughter. Jasmine had chosen a simple navy blue dress that she had owned for 3 years. It was elegant enough to meet the dress code, but modest enough to ensure she remained invisible. She held a glass of sparkling water and made polite conversation with the few people who acknowledged her presence, mostly elderly board members who remembered her volunteer work from college. The evening's program had been filled with speeches about charitable giving and community support. Melody had given a particularly moving presentation about childhood literacy, her voice carrying beautifully across the ballroom as she spoke about the importance of education. The applause had been thunderous, and Jasmine felt genuine pride in her sister's ability to command such attention for a worthy cause. As the formal program concluded and the dancing began, Jasmine noticed a stir. Near the main entrance, security personnel moved with subtle precision, creating a pathway through the crowd. Her heart skipped as she recognized the familiar figure stepping into the ballroom. Adrian Blackstone entered wearing a midnight black tuxedo that emphasized his commanding presence. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His gray eyes surveyed the room with the same careful assessment she had witnessed at the bookstore. The crowd seemed to part naturally before him, conversations pausing as people turned to catch a glimpse of the legendary tech mogul. Jasmine pressed herself further against the wall, hoping to remain unnoticed. She watched as Patricia Wells practically sprinted across the ballroom to intercept Adrian, her smile so bright it could have powered the chandeliers. Within moments, she was leading him directly toward Melody, who turned with a dazzling smile that had stopped traffic since she was 16. The introduction was everything Patricia had dreamed of. Melody extended her hand with perfect grace, her blue eyes sparkling as she gazed up at Adrian. It looked like a magazine cover come to life. The beautiful socialite and the powerful billionaire, surrounded by admiring onlookers. Jasmine felt a familiar ache in her chest as she watched the scene unfold. This was how it always went. Melody commanded attention while Jasmine faded into the background. She told herself it didn't matter that she had found contentment in her simple life at the bookstore, but seeing Adrian smile politely at her sister brought an unexpected pang of something that felt suspiciously like jealousy. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and couples began moving onto the dance floor. Patricia Wells watched with barely contained excitement as Adrian offered his hand to Melody. They made a striking pair as they moved across the polished marble. Melody's red dress flowing like liquid fire against Adrian's dark tuxedo. Jasmine turned toward the exit, planning to slip away before the evening became more painful to watch. She had done her duty by attending, and now she could return to the comfort of her small apartment and a good book. But as she moved toward the door, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "Leaving so early, Miss Wells?" She turned to find Adrian standing directly behind her, having somehow crossed the ballroom without her noticing. Up close, he was even more impressive than she remembered, but there was something in his expression that seemed almost vulnerable. "I've fulfilled my family obligations for the evening," Jasmine replied quietly, acutely aware of the curious stares they were attracting. "I'm sure you'd prefer to return to more interesting company." Adrian's gray eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "Actually, I was hoping you might honor me with a dance." The words hung in the air like a challenge to the natural order of things. Around them, conversations faltered as people strained to hear their exchange. Jasmine was aware of her mother's shocked expression across the room, of Melody's confused frown, of the growing circle of onlookers who seemed to sense that something unprecedented was happening. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Jasmine said softly. "My sister Melody would be a much more suitable partner. She's an excellent dancer." Adrian stepped closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I didn't ask your sister. I asked you." The simple statement carried a weight that seemed to shift something fundamental in the ballroom's atmosphere. Jasmine felt the eyes of everyone around them, the weight of their expectations and assumptions. She thought of a lifetime of stepping aside, of making herself smaller so that Melody could shine brighter. "I'm not very good at dancing," she whispered, her last attempt to deflect the attention that felt so foreign and overwhelming. Adrian smiled then, the first truly warm expression she had seen from him all evening. "Neither am I, really. But I'd like to try if you're willing." Something in his tone, in the genuine warmth of his smile, gave Jasmine the courage to nod. She placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses that surprised her on someone of his wealth and status. He led her onto the dance floor as the orchestra began a gentle waltz, and the crowd parted around them with barely concealed shock. As they began to move together, Jasmine became aware of the complete silence that had fallen over the ballroom. Even the orchestra seemed to be playing more softly, as though afraid to disturb the unprecedented scene unfolding before them. Adrian's hand was warm against her back, steady and reassuring as he guided her through the steps. "Breathe," he murmured near her ear. "Just focus on the music." Jasmine tried to follow his advice, but she could feel the weight of hundreds of four-weight stairs, the shock radiating from her family, the whispered conversations beginning at the edges of the crowd. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Adrian Blackstone was supposed to be charmed by Melody's beauty and sophistication, not wasting his time with the plain sister who ran a small bookstore. "Why?" she asked quietly as they turned slowly. Across the marble floor, Adrian's gray eyes met hers directly. "Because yesterday afternoon was the first time in years that I felt like I could breathe. Because you treated me like a human being instead of a commodity. Because when I look at you, I see something real in a world full of performance." The honesty in his voice made Jasmine's breath catch. She had spent so long believing her family's assessment of her worth that she had never considered. Someone might value the very qualities they dismissed. As the waltz continued, something magical began to happen. The stares and whispers faded into background noise as Jasmine found herself truly seeing Adrian for the first time. Beneath the intimidating exterior was a man who seemed genuinely kind, who had sought out the quiet corner of her bookstore, not for publicity, but for peace. When the music finally ended, Adrian didn't immediately release her hand. Instead, he turned to face the crowd that had gathered around them, his voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make an announcement." The crowd pressed closer, sensing that something momentous was about to happen. "I've decided to make a substantial donation to the Children's Foundation tonight, but I want to do so in honor of someone who embodies the very best of what this organization represents." Jasmine felt her heart racing as Adrian's hand tightened around hers. She could see her parents pushing through the crowd, their faces a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. Jasmine Wells has dedicated her life to fostering literacy and learning in this community through her bookstore. Adrian continued, his voice strong and clear. "She creates a space where knowledge and kindness flourish, where everyone is welcome, regardless of their background or circumstances. It's my privilege to announce a $2 million donation in her name, along with an additional commitment to personally fund a new literacy program that she will design and oversee." The ballroom erupted in gasps and scattered applause, but Jasmine heard none of it. She stared up at Adrian in shock, unable to process what had just happened. He had not only chosen her over Melody in front of the entire social elite of Willowbrook, but he had also just validated her life's work in a way her family never had. Patricia Wells pushed through the crowd, her face pale with shock and barely controlled anger. "Mr. Blackstone, surely there's been some mistake. Melody is the one. Who organized this entire event? She's the one who deserves recognition." Adrian's expression hardened as he turned to face Jasmine's mother. "There's no mistake, Mrs. Wells. I know exactly who I'm honoring tonight." The confrontation sent ripples of tension through the crowd. Melody appeared at her mother's side, her beauty marred by confusion and hurt. For the first time in her life, she was watching someone choose her unremarkable sister over her, and she clearly didn't understand how such a thing was possible. Jasmine felt overwhelmed by the attention, the conflict, and the sudden upheaval of everything she had believed about her place in the world. She gently extracted her hand from Adrian's and stepped back. "Thank you for the honor," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the murmur of the crowd. "But I need some air." She walked quickly toward the terrace doors, leaving behind the shocked faces and whispered conversations. The cool night air was a relief after the suffocating attention of the ballroom. She leaned against the marble railing, trying to process what had just happened. Adrian followed her onto the terrace, his footsteps echoing in the quiet night. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to put you in such an uncomfortable position." Jasmine turned to face him, her green eyes bright, with unshed tears. "Why did you do that?" "My family will never forgive me for upstaging Melody. This was supposed to be her night." "Because it was the truth," Adrian replied simply. "Because I'm tired of pretending that surface beauty matters more than substance. Because someone needed to see you the way you deserve to be seen." The sincerity in his voice broke through the last of Jasmine's defenses. She had spent so many years making herself small, accepting that she would always be the invisible sister. But here was a man who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. "I don't know how to be the center of attention," she admitted. "I've never been the one people notice." Adrian stepped closer, his gray eyes intense in the moonlight. "Then maybe it's time you learned. Maybe it's time the world saw what I saw in that bookstore yesterday," as they stood together on the terrace with the sounds of the shocked ballroom. Behind them, and the star-filled sky above, Jasmine felt something fundamental shift inside her. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her not, despite her differences from Melody, but because of her own unique qualities. The evening that was supposed to be Melody's triumph had become the night that Adrian Blackstone publicly declared his preference for the sister no one expected him to notice. And as Jasmine looked into his eyes, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of being chosen after all. 3 weeks had passed since the charity gala that turned Willowbrook society upside down, and the aftershocks continued to ripple through the small coastal town. Jasmine stood in her bookstore, arranging a display of new romance novels, when she noticed the familiar black sedan pulling up outside. Her heart fluttered with anticipation as Adrian emerged, this time dressed casually in dark jeans and a navy sweater that made his gray eyes even more striking. Since that dramatic evening, Adrian had visited Pages and Dreams almost daily. What had started as brief coffee breaks had evolved into long conversations about books, business, and dreams for the future. Jasmine found herself looking forward to these visits more than she dared admit, even to herself. The bell chimed as Adrian entered, bringing with him the crisp autumn air and a smile that had become increasingly warm over the past weeks. "Good morning, Jasmine. How's the literacy program planning coming along?" Jasmine's face lit up as she gestured toward corner table covered with notebooks, architectural plans, and colorful sketches. "Actually, I wanted to show you something. The community center has agreed to let us use their east wing, and I've designed a reading space that could accommodate up to 50 children at a time." Adrian approached the table, studying her detailed plans with obvious admiration. Over the weeks, he had watched Jasmine transform from a hesitant woman who doubted her own worth into a confident advocate for childhood education. Her passion for the project had brought out a radiance that no amount of makeup or designer clothing could match. "This is incredible," he said, running his finger along the blueprint. "You've thought of everything, from quiet reading nooks to interactive learning stations. The children are going to love this." Jasmine blushed at his praise, still not entirely comfortable with positive attention. "I keep thinking about all the kids who might discover their love of reading here. Maybe we can break the cycle of limited expectations that holds so many people back." Adrian looked at her intently, recognizing the personal significance behind her words. He had learned about her childhood through their conversations, how she had been systematically overlooked while Melody received all the encouragement and opportunities. Yet instead of becoming bitter, Jasmine had channeled her experiences into a determination to ensure no child felt invisible. "Speaking of expectations," Adrian said carefully, "I have something to discuss with you." My mother is flying in from New York tomorrow. She's expressed interest in meeting the woman who has captured so much of my attention lately." Jasmine's coffee cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down. "Your mother wants to meet me?" "Adrian, I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of scrutiny. What if she thinks I'm completely wrong for you?" Adrian reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. "Jasmine, you need to understand something. For the past 5 years, my mother has been introducing me to what she considers suitable women, socialites, heiresses, women who look perfect on paper but have nothing substantial to offer. You're the first person I've ever wanted her to meet because you actually matter to me." The sincerity in his voice made Jasmine's heart race. Over the weeks, she had begun to hope that Adrian's interest in her was genuine. But his family's approval felt like an insurmountable hurdle. She had heard stories about his mother, Catherine Blackstone, a formidable woman who had built her own business empire and had very specific ideas about what kind of woman belonged with her son. "What if I say something wrong?" Jasmine asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if she takes one look at me and decides I'm not sophisticated enough?" Adrian's grip on her hand tightened. "Then she would be making the same mistake everyone else has made about you. But I don't think that will happen. My mother is intelligent enough to recognize authenticity when she sees it." That evening, Jasmine stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying on the third outfit in an hour. Nothing felt right. The navy dress seemed too formal, the cream sweater too casual, the black pantsuit too businesslike. Finally, she settled on a forest green dress that brought out her eyes, paired with the pearl necklace her grandmother had left her, as she applied a light touch of makeup. Jasmine reflected on how much her life had changed since that day Adrian first walked into her bookstore. The shy, overlooked woman who had spent years making herself invisible was gradually learning to step into the light. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when she doubted her worth. But Adrian's consistent encouragement was helping her rebuild her confidence from the ground up. The next afternoon, Adrian arrived at the bookstore with an elegant woman in her early 60s. Catherine Blackstone was smaller than Jasmine had expected, with silver hair styled in a classic bob and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a tailored burgundy suit that spoke of understated wealth and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in charge. "Mother, I'd like you to meet Jasmine Wells," Adrian said, his voice carrying a note of pride that made Jasmine's chest warm. "Jasmine, this is my mother, Catherine Blackstone." Catherine extended her hand with a polite smile. "Miss Wells, I've heard quite a lot about you. Adrian tells me you're responsible for this charming establishment." "Yes, ma'am. Welcome to Pages and Dreams." Jasmine shook Catherine's hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. "Would you like some coffee? I have a special blend that pairs perfectly with the shortbread cookies I baked this morning." As Jasmine prepared their refreshments, she was acutely aware of Catherine's eyes following her movements. The older woman said little, but her attention was complete and analytical. When Jasmine returned with a beautifully arranged tray, Catherine accepted, her cup with a nod of approval. "Adrian mentioned that you've designed a literacy program for the community," Catherine said, settling into one of the comfortable reading chairs. "I'd be interested to hear about your approach." For the next hour, Jasmine found herself deep in conversation with Catherine about education, community development, and the challenges facing small businesses. To her surprise, Catherine was an engaged and thoughtful listener, asking insightful questions and offering observations based on her own experiences in business. Adrian watched the interaction with growing satisfaction. He could see his mother's initial skepticism gradually giving way to genuine interest. Catherine had built her own empire through intelligence and determination, and she recognized those same qualities in Jasmine, even if they were wrapped in a quieter package than she might have expected. When Mrs. Henderson arrived to pick up her weekly book order, Jasmine excused herself to help the elderly woman. Catherine observed the interaction carefully, noting how Jasmine remembered not only Mrs. Henderson's reading preferences, but also asked about her granddaughter's recovery from surgery and her husband's recent retirement. She knows all her customers. "Personally," Catherine murmured to Adrian, "she makes everyone feel valued." Adrian replied, "Watch how she interacts with people. There's no pretense, no calculation. She genuinely cares."
Catherine continued to observe as a young mother entered with two small children.
Jasmine immediately knelt down to the children's level, asking about their favorite stories and recommending new books based on their interests. When one of the children accidentally knocked over a display, Jasmine simply smiled and involved them in rebuilding it, turning a potential embarrassment into a learning moment. Expected, Catherine admitted quietly. Different how? Adrian asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Most of the women you've dated have been focused on making an impression. Jasmine seems focused on making connections. It's a depth there that's quite refreshing. As the afternoon wore on, Catherine found herself genuinely enjoying Jasmine's company. The young woman was well-read, thoughtful, and possessed a quiet strength that reminded Catherine of herself at that age. When Jasmine showed her the detailed plans for the literacy program, Catherine was impressed by the thoroughness and innovation evident in every aspect. "This is quite ambitious," Catherine said, studying the financial projections. "You considered expanding the program to other communities?" Jasmine's eyes brightened. "Actually, I have. I think the model could work in any town that has the space and community support. The key is making sure each program reflects the specific needs of its location." Catherine exchanged a meaningful look with Adrian. Here was a woman who thought beyond her immediate circumstances, who had vision and the intelligence to implement it. More importantly, she had clearly inspired something in Adrian that Catherine had never seen before. As evening approached and Catherine prepared to leave, she asked to speak with Jasmine privately. Adrian stepped outside, giving them space for what he hoped would be a positive conversation. "Miss Wells," Catherine began, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "I want you to know that I've never seen my son as happy as he's been these past few weeks. Whatever you're doing, it's working." Jasmine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Mrs. Blackstone, I want you to know that my feelings for Adrian are genuine. Not interested in his money or status. I care about him as a person." Catherine smiled, the first truly warm expression she had shown all day. "That's exactly what I hoped you would say. Adrian has been surrounded by people who want something from him his entire life. You're the first person who seems to want him for himself." Relief flooded through Jasmine as she realized she had passed whatever tests Catherine had been conducting. "He's shown me kindness when I didn't think I deserved it. He's helped me believe in myself in ways I never thought possible. And you've given him something he's been searching for without realizing it," Catherine replied. "You've given him peace. I can see it in his eyes when he looks at you." When Adrian returned, he found both women smiling. The tension that had marked the beginning of their meeting completely dissipated. Catherine embraced Jasmine warmly before departing, whispering something in her ear that made the younger woman's eyes shine with unshed tears. After Catherine left, Adrian and Jasmine walked along the quiet streets of Willowbrook as the sun set over the harbor. The autumn air was crisp, and Jasmine had wrapped herself in a wool coat that Adrian found utterly charming in its simplicity. "What did my mother whisper to you?" Adrian asked, taking her hand as they strolled. Jasmine smiled, squeezing his fingers. "Gently, she said that you deserve someone who loves you for your heart, not your portfolio. That she thinks you've found that person." Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her, his gray eyes intense in the fading light. "Jasmine, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to be valued for who I am, rather than what I can provide. I love your kindness, your intelligence, your passion for helping others. I love the way you light up when you talk about books, and the way you make everyone around you feel important." Jasmine's breath caught as she realized what he was saying. "Adrian ... I love you, Jasmine Wells," he said simply. "Not because you're convenient or suitable or any of the cold reasons I once thought mattered. I love you because you're extraordinary, in all the ways that actually count." Tears spilled down Jasmine's cheeks as she reached up to cup his face. "I love you too. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone. Never thought anyone could see me the way you do." Adrian leaned down and kissed her, soft and sure under the streetlights of the small town where they had found each other. It was a kiss that spoke of futures built together, of love that had grown from genuine connection rather than superficial attraction. When they broke apart, Jasmine rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Wait, what happens? Now? She asked softly. Now we build something beautiful together, Adrian replied, holding her close. Your literacy program, our life, our future, all of it. As they stood together in the gathering dusk, Jasmine marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. The invisible sister who had spent years believing she wasn't enough had found someone who saw her as everything. In Adrian, the billionaire who had thought he needed a perfect accessory for his perfect life, had discovered that real love was infinitely more valuable than any facade. In the distance, the lights of Willowbrook twinkled like stars, illuminating. A town where true love had triumphed over expectations, where authenticity had defeated artifice, and where two hearts had found their home in each other. The story that began with shock and scandal was ending with something far more precious. A love built on truth, understanding, and the courage to choose what matters most.